Yes, I'd like to introduce our first keynote speaker. It is André Hoffmann from the Hoffmann Global Institute for Business and Society. He's talking about partnering for a sustainable future. Welcome with me, André Hoffmann from France.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Odile Rundquist, and I have the privilege today to interview André Hoffmann, Vice President of the Board of Roche. Alongside his non-executive role in the family business, André has a distinguished courses in nature conservation and sustainability. Among others, he's on the board of the VVS. He's also the president of the Foundation MAVA and Foundation Tour du Vala. He has joined the board of Systemic IQ to help positively disrupt critical economic system. He is also on the board of trustee of the World Economic Forum and the Center of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And he has been instrumental in establishing the Hoffmann Global Institute in Business and Society at INSEAD. And today, André will share his view on the ways our relationship to nature and the environment can change after the pandemic. So André, COVID-19 threatened to become one of the most difficult tests faced by humanity in modern history. What are your takeaways of the past 6 months?
Thank you very much, Odile, for this incredibly elogious introduction. I'm very grateful that I have the opportunity to address myself to all of you. I am, of course, deeply concerned by the question you just addressed. One of the principles I was taught at business school is that you should never waste a good crisis. And so we need to understand why this situation we are in actually is a crisis. And I would suggest that irrespective of course, a health issue which has taken many lives and infected many patients across the planet, there is a lesson into this particular event. We've been for years profiling ourselves as an absolute dominator on the planet. We have defined our period as the Anthropocene. The anthropos, the man, the human, is in charge of what happens on the planet. And then a small, very primitive form of not even life comes about. We're talking about a virus. A virus cannot survive on its own. It needs a host. And that virus comes, jumps on us, and suddenly our whole system collapses. Supply chains are disrupted across the planet. People are hiding at home. They're not talking to each other anymore. We have a crisis situation at all levels of our human society. And I find that incredibly humbling. I find that incredibly informative. I find that incredibly moving that we are not as strong and we are not as much in control as we thought. Our current operating system is not fit for purpose. Some perfectly predictable event, the pandemic that we are getting through at the moment has been predicted many, many times. And we've had 5 world health scare on that dimension. I mean, there's been a SARS 1, now we're on SARS 2, there's been a MERS, there's been Ebola, there's been chikungunya, there's been Chaka. I mean, there are a number of these zoonoses which have been well described. And now we are being confronted to one without really being prepared. Our system has crumbled, in particular the health systems. And although now 6 months later we have recovered and we are, I think, much more on top of the epidemic or pandemic rather that we would have been otherwise, it is showing that we need to increase the resilience of our system. Perhaps I just mentioned that the reason why this has hit us so hard is because not everything was all right before. In fact, the world was in a crisis before. I mean, in particular, the crisis of climate, and I mean the crisis of biodiversity loss. We were already in a situation where a number of those systems we've constructed and perhaps even put in place have not dealt with the real issue. We had an unequal world with some people taking more space than others, and that is now an opportunity that the virus has given us to build this part of system, to build our infrastructure in a different and I hope more stable way.
COVID-19 is a wake-up call globally and the opportunity to change and build better. What are the key ingredients to succeed?
We should approach the system of development and the system of architecture of the world economy in a slightly more holistic manner. We cannot expect to dominate in the short term what is happening around us. We need to create a balance in the long term. So we need to create a sort of partnership with the conditions around us. And this partnership should express itself at all levels, not just the social level, not just the natural level, but also the financial level. We need to make sure that we account for the three capitals that really matter, maybe the four capitals that matter: human, social, environmental, and financial, and not just the financial one. So at the moment, humanity, and in particular businesses, the value creation mechanism that we have, has been focusing on short-term profit maximization. And that, in my view, is inappropriate to the circumstances in which we are. We need to be able to think in terms of a broader aspect to reconstructing our life system. We need to be able to be more attentive to minorities, and, Black Lives Matter is not suddenly materialized out of thin air. It is a system that has been in existence for a long time. Certain parts of humanity dominate other parts of humanity for their own benefit. And the sustainable, durable organization will have to be more broadly based. So we are going to have to favor partnerships rather than domination. I feel that if you really want to reconstruct something strong and long-term, we are going to have to introduce nature in our operating system. I don't know if you've been aware of the negotiation at European Union level, but there is now a new Green Deal where the European stimulus package, which is the bailout for a number of European companies, will be implemented next to a series of conditionality based on the green economy. And there are some economists demonstrating that we are able to recreate a more suitable, efficient way of creating value if we invest into green-based solution and if we invest into just industrial solution as we did in the past. The rate of return on money invested in the green economy is likely to provide a higher rate of return than if we continue to do it as we did it until now. So we are going to have to sacrifice a small proportion of our immediate return in order to create long-term stability. And we will only be able to have a long-term stability if we take into account the weak point of the existing system. So we need to be more inclusive, leave no one behind. There should not be differential treatment. There should not be different salaries. There should not be different civil rights. We should be all treated in the same way. And there should also be a recovery that will allow us to use natural resources in the long term. That has to introduce a certain notion of circularity. But for corporations to be able to lower the dependency on what nature is providing us with is going to be a key to the long-term success. I don't think that humanity will survive for very long next to a dysfunctional natural system. And nature is the life system support of humanity on Earth. And if we don't collectively look after our global commons, we are likely to lose the base of what actually constitutes our prosperity.
So what does that mean for business model? And specifically, being the vice chairman of Roche and part of the family having the voting rights, could you talk about what has been put in place at Roche?
My family, as you said in your introduction, is the majority owner of one of the big Swiss companies. The Roche Group is a global company based in Switzerland. It is very important for this argumentation I've just tried to demonstrate that we can show within our own company how being respectful of the environment is something that can help to add value to the business. So at Roche, we started 15 years ago by introducing a committee at board levels, by making it a board matter. And that this sustainability committee looks after the corporate governance of the enterprise, but also about our impact on natural, social, and human systems. And by making this a matter of importance at the governance level, we've been able to sort of introduce these new decision criteria when we make investment decision or when you make business decision in the broader sense. So in order to demonstrate the materiality of this environment thinking, and again, environment is not just nature, environment is people and nature, we have started to reply to a couple of indexes, and I want to single out the Dow Jones Sustainability Index, where we have, where after a couple of years trying to understand how we could address them, have scored number one, or sustainability champion in the Dow Jones Index for 10 consecutive years until a couple of years ago. Now we're number 2. So, I mean, we're not so far off. But the reason I'm mentioning this is because at the beginning, when we started playing with this index, people got quite excited and so looked at it like if it was a competition. And when we won, of course, everybody was pleased. When we won again, everybody was very pleased. When we won for a third time, it was already becoming something more of a happiness than just an event. And 10 years later, of course, absolutely everybody within the company has absorbed this reality. We need to be thinking in a sustainable manner. And this is now part of the company's DNA. And we are very thrilled about this. There are still not very standardized metrics into impact measurement for investors and businesses. But when the system will be put in place, because it will, we will be well positioned because we have been taking this entire philosophy for quite a long time. Our company defines itself as doing today what the patient needs tomorrow. And it's not possible to have this long-term thinking if you do not have an opportunity to prepare for the long term, to prepare the conditions for prosperity.
Together with your wife, you established the Hoffmann Global Institute in Business and Society at INSEAD. What kind of future leaders would you like to see emerge?
Now we're getting into something more practical than just general. We've been talking about big principles, and I've been able to demonstrate that by using Roche, we can demonstrate that this has a business value, business justification. But the real issue is an issue of leadership. Who is going to step forward to actually change the way we do business? At the moment, most business schools, and INSEAD is a business school, teach the master in business administration on the principle that what matters is maximizing short-term returns, short-term financial returns. And we created now the Global Institute of Business and Society, which has as a prime objective to introduce sustainability into everything the business school does. And that means teaching the graduates of INSEAD to no longer just specialize onto shareholder return, but to look at impact these companies are having on society. So in a very brutal form, not managing the company for shareholders, but managing it for stakeholders, for the people who are part of the area in which the company is active. So for Roche, to come back to our family example, the stakeholder is mostly the patient. We work for the patient and not necessarily for the owners. That has a couple of consequences, which I think are going to be far-reaching into the way we construct after the COVID, this new system, which is going to be stabler because it's going to take into account all the constituent part of the value creation mechanism. So the business of business is business should be left aside, and we should be able to measure impact for the well-being of society. And that has been very powerful. I'm very glad to say, and this is not exaggeration, that this initiative has really completely changed the perception of students of the school. We do not get people who are there just to increase their salary. We get people who want to do something for the world. And so business as a force for good, doing well by doing good, is something which I think can help us shape the world. I mean, we should be ambitious about it. And so I hope that we will be able to syndicate and to enthusiasm a couple of other teaching organizations, and that we will in the future see companies which are not just run for profit, but are run for society.
This institute is particularly important in this time of crisis. Maybe you can conclude this interview and you can give the audience your main message as you open this forum. So what should humanity learn from this crisis?
What we have to understand is that converting our existence into cash and then taking the cash to do something about society at large is not the most efficient way of doing it. If we have to cut the forest in order to convert it to cash, in order to be able to replant it, we're going a little bit too far already. We should be cutting just enough of the forest to allow us to grow without chopping it all down. So the real way I would like to capture that is this expression that it's not how you spend the money that matters, it's how you make it. One of the reasons why we're having this problem with this virus is because we are trying to eradicate it. Eradication of a species by another species is extremely rare. It hasn't happened much in history. We need to be able to live with the virus. We need to be able to develop a positive cohabitation. So dominance bad, cohabitation good. And the more we can work along those lines, the better.